Now here in this slide, we see some educational attainment rates based on ethnicity. And this is a bit older, 2018, but nonetheless, it's close enough to today. And when it comes to Americans as a whole, you see 89.5 high school graduation rates, and then 35% college graduation. This is for the entire population of the country. Now, broken down into ethnicity, you see among Caucasians or whites, 90.2 high school graduation rate, and a 32.5 college graduation rate. So next we have Asian Pacific Islanders, AAPI, and you do see slightly higher high school graduation rates. But when it comes to college, here it's pretty significant, not only compared to whites, but to other ethnic groups. And that's at 56.5, more than half of the population, have some kind of college degree, okay, or more, meaning, a postgraduate. And then you go down to the other major ethnic groups in our country. African Americans are pretty close to that of the rest of the country, 87.9, or close enough to this, right? 89.5. When it comes to college education, lower than whites and Asians at 25.2. But I should mention this, by the way. It says 87.9 here for 2018. Now, before the Civil Rights era, okay, in fact, in 1960, the census counted high school graduation rates among African Americans as hovering around 20%. Okay, so it's, when you think about it, this remarkable climb out of Jim Crow and poverty and so forth. Jim Crow meaning segregation, right, and education and also economic and political segregation, and them climbing to reach near parity with other groups, okay, at 87.9. So you jump from 1960 from 20% to about 88% by 2018. Now, Hispanics here lower when it comes to high school graduation rates, and then with college as well. Okay, so it's a really interesting discussion here when it comes for this. This could be a topic, for a different class, right? Like ethnic studies or Latinx studies. But there are several reasons for this, namely because of what's called segmented labor market and immigrants coming from Latin America really integrating in that market. But again, that's a topic of a different discussion, however important it is. Now, in this slide, we are looking solely at Asian Americans. And as you could probably notice here, Asian America encompasses a lot of different groups. Okay, from Asian Indians, part of what's called South Asia, right? And then East Asia, like China and Japan. Southeast Asians, like Thai, Filipinos, Vietnamese, right? So it encompasses a very wide group, or number of group, right? Now, this is important to look at because what you'll notice here is the remarkable disparities when you break it down from, Asian American in general to the particular, if you will, ethnic groups that are subsumed beneath the category of Asian American. Here we're beginning to question what we call the Asian American model minority myth, specifically how it relates to education, right? If it is true that Asian Americans are, quote, whiz kids and, these exceptional students across the board, right? What accounts for the disparity here? Now, when we look at some groups like Asian Indians, we see very high rates when it comes to bachelor and postgraduate degrees, right? 33 and 39. In fact, these are among the highest. Comes to Filipino, we see very high among bachelors, but smaller with postgraduate, only 8% compared to, let's say, 39% Asian Indians. Sri Lankans at 28, Chinese at 27, and so on. Okay, so less than high school rate. Let's look at that. Look at this. Okay, less than high school, you see significantly high numbers among the Laotian, Hmong, Cambodian, and Vietnamese. And, this is a wide disparity when you compare it to, let's say, this group here, Asian Indians or Koreans, right? All right, so this is very telling, the educational attainment based on Asian national origin, because what it does is complicates the picture. And the glaring mistake that's happening here when you accord Asian Americans that stereotype of the model minority is that, hey, how do you account for these groups? Okay, they're Asian American, Cambodian, Hmong, and Laotian. Why do you see them at the lowest ranks in American society as a whole, right? Compared to other groups, right? Like even the high school, less than high school rate, right? And then some seem to correspond kind of close to U.S. statistics as a whole, right? That we had in the previous slide, Americans as a whole. Some seem to correspond with the Latino or Latinx or African Americans. And then you do have cases like, again, Asian Indians where it's very impressive, right? And them and the Sri Lankans, Bangladesh here, okay? As I noted here, take note of intergroup variation. This is our telling sign here of why the stereotype of model minority is largely mythic. Okay, this is our first step in problematizing it, because Asian America is not so homogeneous as some analysts may believe. Okay, and I would say when it comes to the academic world, the world of scholarship and research, surely Asian Americans are aware of this. The Asian American researchers and sociologists, they're aware of this fact. But somehow other researchers tend to just lump Asian Americans into one group, right? And again, when it comes to education, we see the problem with that because it doesn't account for all the disparities when you do that, when you lump them into one homogeneous group, okay? So this is our first lesson here in problematizing it. So again, we have to ask, how much of the model minority image is true? How much is it false? How much is it exaggerated? And when we look at the world of education, well, this graph right here shows a lot, it reveals a lot. Okay. Now we have to ask, where did this stereotype begin? Right, this notion of whiz kids, Asian Americans as all inherently exceptional. Okay, and the beginnings of this stereotype actually begins in mainstream media. And here are some magazine covers, right, that were published in the 80s and 90s. One is Time Magazine, one is Newsweek, and Asian American whiz kids, right, and the cover, and then in the Newsweek in the 90s, the drive to excel, right? So we have to remember that Asian Americans constitute a small fraction, especially back then, more so than today, a small fraction of the U.S. population. And they also endure discrimination due to their alleged inferiority, right? Let's remember that they were caricatured as inferior, not exceptional. In other words, the opposite of the stereotype. And also, we have to remember this about the stereotype. Most Asian immigrants back in the day, before 65, were unskilled, right? It's unskilled labor coming over, not professional. Well, the historians of Asian American history point to this model minority image as early as here, the 1980s, right? This reportage of how Japanese and Chinese Americans in particular was succeeding at higher rates than whites in the dominant society, despite discrimination, despite adversity. So you have this well-known cover on, like, for example, Newsweek, the model minority, right? Now, even in the Time magazine, as you see here, and I'm going to get a quote from here, and here's the quote. Asian American success has bred resentment, envy, and even backlashes of violence from other subnationalities groups as blacks and Latinos, unquote. So in other words, other ethnic groups resented the fact that they were being told to imitate Asians, right, in order to achieve attainment in society. And this cultural reasoning still persists today, as we'll soon see.